Hi, folks. This is an open letter to the ambassador of the Red Dragon family. Dear Mr. Ambassador, in the interest of time which neither of us can afford to waste, I'll get right to the point of this communique. There's a fraud in our midst who many of us have placed, albeit naively, a good deal of trust in, and his name is Dave Schmidt. He has injected himself into the Dragon family as smoothly as his emergence into the RV-GCR debate and discussions. In fact, it's no accident that Mr. Schmidt transitioned from longtime politician in Washington state to activist and woo-woo extraordinaire in, of all places, Sedona, Arizona, the new age capital of the United States, where people are willing to sell or mortgage anything just to attend the latest craze or philosophy. Enter the Dave Schmidt huckster workshops. Mr. Schmidt's entire shell game places one person at the head of the line, and it's more than obvious who that is. You guessed it, the first guy with his tray at the buffet, Dave Schmidt. Having this narcissist involved in the selection and processing of individuals and organizations qualified for funding projects by the Dragon family is like having the fox guarding the henhouse. First and foremost, Mr. Schmidt is a politician and a really bad actor, as evidenced by his abysmal failures in the Washington State Senate, where he accomplished little and lost twice for re-election, not to mention that he illegally and personally used campaign contributions and staved off prosecution by promising to pay back the money. His history speaks for itself, and I'll not go any further into this treatise. It's easy enough to trace his past activities. But most importantly, and in view of current events and broadcasts, Mr. Schmidt has clearly demonstrated both his elitist and selfish disposition in replies to many of his followers' legitimate and sincere questions. Most recently, because the fire and the questions got a little too hot with one of his acolytes in Southern California, he accused her on air of being greedy, selfish, ungrateful, and not having a spirit of thankfulness. This lady was behaving very respectfully, asking legitimate questions that most anybody would ask, including some. Many others were simply just afraid to ask. And then she was summarily dumped from the call. As Mr. Schmidt's relationship grew and strengthened with the ambassador, his true colors emerged even more. We were now the serfs or the slaves, and Mr. Schmidt was now master and lord. Another shining example of this out-of-control politician and bad actor took place with a colleague of mine in late November after it was announced that the family was willing to fund worthwhile projects. My associate sent an email off to Mr. Schmidt in response to his admission that he was probably going to start with the people that attended his workshops first, and that he didn't know any other way to do it. My friend wrote and suggested to Mr. Schmidt that there was a much more efficient and cost-effective process, and certainly a more equitable method of distribution than just starting with those who have attended Dave's workshops. Obviously, His Highness was going to have none of that and served up many of the same platitudes as he did with the woman who called in from Southern California, without even considering or even inquiring what those suggestions might be for humanity. Once again, Dave Schmidt assumed the defensive posture and began accusing my friend of the usual crap of griping, complaining, whining, being ungrateful, and thankless. The most recent example of this out of control and bad actor took place unbelievably in Europe and in the presence of you, Mr. Ambassador. It happened at about the 80 to 85 minute mark when a gentleman by the name of JR called into the broadcast from Orlando, Florida. He was very polite and soft-spoken and had just a few comments and asked if he could have his friend Aubrey say a few words as well. Permission was granted by Lord Schmidt, and Aubrey proceeded to detail his distrust of Dave Schmidt. Even though Aubrey had the floor for a significant period of time, it didn't take long for Mr. Schmidt to drop him like a hot rock and then go on a rant, chastising him with much of the same drivel he used on everyone else who dared challenge this has-been politician. Even though Aubrey was very firm and focused in his objectives and comments, frequently using the phrase, "with all due respect," he was castigated with griping, whining, complaining, and being ungrateful. Aubrey wasn't doing any of that. Instead, he was pleading and crying out for help, as are millions of us. But His Holiness couldn't hear the pleas or the cries through his own greed and avarice. It's very clear, and has been for quite some time now, that Dave Schmidt is concerned first and foremost about Dave Schmidt and people like our lady friend in Southern California, my colleague, and Aubrey have the audacity to challenge this misguided fraud. I certainly agree that Mr. Schmidt has done a great and noble service in attracting so many people that have programs, projects, and proposals to help humanity and get out from under the thumb of their oppressors, the cabal. But the last person you want leading a charge of this magnitude is someone whose self-interest ranks well above those who are in unimaginable pain and need. That said, I've got a great idea. How about, Mr. Ambassador, you place Dave Schmidt with his tray at the end of the buffet and see just how benevolent he behaves then. At the end of the buffet, not at the beginning. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can pretty much guess how that would turn out. Whining and griping and complaining. Lastly, I applaud all those brave and courageous people just like Aubrey who see right through a phony, a politician, and a bad actor. Kudos. Congratulations for having the courage and the wisdom and the common sense and clear thinking to smell a rat. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for taking the time to read this. And please know that I do pray for not only those in tremendous pain and need, but also for Mr. Schmidt as well. Many blessings, Bentley.